Well, good evening for some of you who are calling in from North America, and good morning to I think most of you. Early morning on Friday. Happy Friday in Asia, and Happy New Year. Many of you, I think, are still shaking off the cobwebs of the holidays. What was I'm sure was a very different holiday season, but nevertheless, I think many of us are getting back in the saddle and getting excited for what is sure to be a very interesting and hopefully better year this year in 2021. Today I'm going to be thanks for joining again. Today we're going to be presenting our first report on the Jakarta data center market. I just want to start just with some quick background on this project. This has been a pet project of ours that actually took quite a few years to reach this point. I have family ties, have been visiting Jakarta for many years, almost every year since getting married there back in 2005, and started taking a much greater interest in the technology, and then of course the data center and cloud infrastructure market, and started building up a network and visiting some sites over the last few years. And last year, I should say, 2020 was the year we were supposed to kind of complete all the site tours and the visits with the operators and to finalize the report. But then COVID hit. I'm based here in Canada, in Toronto, and it was difficult for me to get back to Asia this year, as you can imagine. So, but we had laid the groundwork in 2019, and we made use of remote tools. We picked up a local resource in Jakarta, Indonesia, to help us with the final site visits in Jakarta. And I wanted just to shout out to them. They're not on this. I'll be presenting the report. But Ainsley Woods here in Toronto and Fenki Jang in Jakarta just were instrumental in making this happen, and in this just very unique and challenging environment. So we're really proud of this project, that it was the first one, and that we were able to pull off the meat of the project during a pandemic with 3 analysts working on it during all hours of the day on a remote basis. So I hope you enjoy the findings, and I hope you get a better sense of what we're seeing in the marketplace. So this is just a quick overview of the presentation. I want to start with just some quick background on the rising internet economy in Indonesia. We'll look at some of the metrics that we produced on this market and our projections. Take a look at the map of not just where the data centers are distributed, but where hyperscale cloud nodes we feel where they're located in the market. Talk a bit about some of the dynamics that are interesting and unique to the market, and conclude with a bit of a strategic summary, just to give you some sense of how far and how fast this market has come in a very short time frame. And then hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A. So I think some of you have seen this study. Actually, it was put out by a partnership between Bain, Temasek, and Google. It was a bit late. I think it published late in 2019, but I think quite relevant still. And I think some of these data points I think speak quite clearly to where the Indonesian internet economy is going. You see the rise in users. I think that looks like 50-60% growth in a 4-year time frame. Estimates of the internet economy being worth well over $100 billion. And if you just look at the size of Indonesia, if you think about how big Jakarta is, and then you think about how big the country is, the 4th most populous country in the world. Sometimes people don't necessarily know that. And if you just look at the other countries in Southeast Asia, if you add them all up, the populations are not that much. I think it's like 300 and change. So they're not that much bigger than Indonesia. So you can imagine just how many mobile phones are in that market, how many apps are being used, how many internet users, and how many users are still to come as this market begins to take off. And so, I found really striking, I mentioned my visits to the region in the last, say, about 15 years. And, just in the last 3 to 5 years, I noticed just the rise of startups and these new technologies and applications that people were using. I think the iPhone was a relatively late entry to Indonesia, but when it came, you started to see these things pop up. Gojek being the one that gets a lot of attention, but there are now several. I think the official count is there are 10, I think, unicorns in Indonesia. And for this audience today, and for what we're going to discuss, where are these applications run, where is the data stored? Well, they're going to be on the cloud. So I've tailored this a bit, hopefully for you guys. You see a mix of Western and Asia Pacific names and companies that are running on hyperscale clouds. The hyperscale clouds are represented in the middle circle, and then of course many of these hyperscale clouds end up living in a wholesale data center run and built and operated by a third-party data center operator. And so that's the foundation and the basis of where much of the the market on a global basis is going. And as I will argue in this short webinar, I think that's particularly the case in this market. And so the applications and the content being developed, the users just continuing to grow. The infrastructure has to be there to support it. And those clouds are now landing in Indonesia. And so this is a quick snapshot of the hyperscale clouds, and not an extremely long list, as you know. We have 2 of them already live in the last several years. The 2 big ones, AWS and Azure, have confirmed, and there's various chatter that some of the hyperscale platforms from China will be arriving soon with local in-country infrastructure. Huawei, Tencent are certainly not exhaustive. There are other platforms like the ByteDance and Kingsoft Cloud, and I'm sure others that I'm missing that are going to consume at a close to, if not at, a hyperscale level. So this is the first. This is our a snapshot of the value of the market in US dollars. Our projections, we've projected out to 2025, and so you'll see it's a very consistent and steady growth trajectory. We've got the market this last year, I should say again, at just over worth just over 200 million in US dollars. But the 5-year CAGR we have as for the total market is at about 23.7%. And as you notice between the 2 different hues of red, the trajectories are going to be different between the retail and wholesale growth. And so it's quite a big difference, as you'll see there. We've got wholesale growing at a 5-year CAGR of 44%, and the retail component of the market at 13.3 averages out. As you see, total market, we if things track as we have them, should be surpassing the 500 million mark in about 2024. And if you'll see along the bottom, right now in 2021, around 70% of the market, or say, I should say like a third of the market is hyperscale. But if you see how it tracks by 2025, it'll be a majority hyperscale market. This is on a revenue total value basis. And I'll show you some supply and inventory numbers in just a second. So it's the growth rate for those charts that you just saw. As you'll notice, I think that towards the left, you're seeing a big spike. We feel in the 2021, we feel that this year is going to be a very big hyperscale growth year. And as you can see, the growth rates will taper off a bit, but they're still going to be pushing along a very aggressive trajectory, growing at an aggressive pace. The total market we feel is going to grow in the the 30% range, and as the market gets bigger, still stay in the 20s. And as I think you gathered from the slide chart before, the retail market is going to be growing at a slightly slower rate, but as you can see, still very much healthy, consistent growth in the next 5-6 year period. Some of you who are clients of ours and seen our research on other data center markets in the Asia region and elsewhere are probably familiar with this, but I just want to quickly, as a preview before the next chart I show you, kind of how we measure and articulate supply in a marketplace. So we've done a kind of call it on a tiered basis, in the sense that first we look at the built out capacity. Of course, we will have an estimate on the absorption of that currently built out live up and running capacity. And then we have a number for the max built out capacity, which, as you can see from the picture there, that is essentially what the market would be if you built out fully into that live data center. And then we have total capacity, which is meant to encompass all the third-party data centers, if they were fully built out, as well as data centers in the midst of construction, just broke ground, land parcels that have been purchased and confirmed by operators. And so that will give you a perspective, as you can see here on that bar charts on the left. So the 475, obviously it's a current snapshot, and that's what the total capacity in the market. But right now, I think what's very on top of mind for many of you are the numbers towards the bottom of those bar charts. And so they represent what's currently, so the current built out capacity in the market is 72.5 megawatts. And we have the absorption at just over 55, I think it's 56% there. And that represents about 41 megawatts. And the numbers are slightly different when you look at it on a rack basis, you can see there. We have it at about the utilization or absorption would move up to about 75, 76%. So as you can see, definitely a lot of inventory that's yet to be built out and that we project will be building out in this, in this next 5-year time frame. Sorry, just moving along here. So this is just a quick map that we've created that shows where where we feel the clusters have started to emerge and where the data center footprint in Jakarta is distributed. Now it's a smaller market with, as you can see, total operational data centers about 20. And so the clusters are still kind of in early stages of development, but we feel that this is kind of where they've emerged. I think many of you know, I mean, a lot of the hyperscale data centers have gone to the east outside the city, where there's quite a bit of land and of course access to quality power around Bekasi and Karawang. So think of that as the east cluster. Of course, I think the main a lot of the main connectivity points and where the sector emerged in the center of the city is another cluster. The south has historically been a cluster around Bogor, and that surrounding area has definitely been a place where you've seen data centers emerge. And I think probably one of the younger clusters seems to be developing around, let's call it the west, just west and to the northwest of the south of the city, around Tangerang. And we've seen some of the newer some newer builds emerge around there. And so I think definitely we like to, just as a comment here, we like to, we feel it's important to map out these the distribution of data centers, particularly because Hyperscale tends to, of course, build and then diversify in terms of the geographic distribution to get some redundancy and diversity. And so, we feel like that taking a look at this, mapping it out, will give you a perspective of where Hyperscale will end up moving to and diversifying as they build out across this metro. So sorry about this, and moving along. And this is just a quick chart summarizes. Apologies if there are any spelling mistakes or naming convention errors, but just a quick snapshot of where the cloud on-ramps are. I think it's very clear that that this is a developing market. We're in the early stages of what is very much going to be an aggressive and long cloud build out. And so the infrastructure will build out, but also the interconnection and nodes and the cloud on-ramps will also develop at a similar pace. And so you should expect to see that develop alongside the market. So Hyperscale, definitely, top of mind for operators in this market. I would argue the basis of all the, as you can see from our projections, the basis of the growth that we should expect. The big question for data center operators, how much are the hyperscale platforms leasing, and how much are they, building or self-building or pursuing on their own and not working necessarily directly with a third-party data center operator, colocation provider. Currently, as we sit right now, as you can see across the title of this slide, we have seen exclusive leasing from the two hyperscale cloud platforms that have landed in Indonesia. I think the big and then we've mapped them out here for you. And I think the big question everybody is asking about this market is, AWS, Azure, they've confirmed, what are they going to do? And so I've talked a bit more about this in detail in the report. So if you're interested in the commentary, please inquire. But the punchline and the summary is that we feel that there's going to be, I think one of these platforms will probably slant a little more to the leasing side. One of the others will slant to the build side. But over time, as they build out and as they need to move the availability zones architecture to other regions, we think it's going to be a mixed strategy. We feel that they will both build and lease colocation. And so you'll see that 100% zero continuum move a bit. It won't stay exclusively colocation, but I think you're going to see it a mix as the rest of the clouds enter the market. So, and I'll talk a bit more about that upside from the hyperscale side just after I summarize just quickly some of the dynamics. I think in tracking data center markets around the world, a lot of the patterns we see elsewhere, not surprisingly, we have seen in this marketplace. Hyperscale, the retail co-location market is starting to slow in comparison and also separate a bit between those retail co-location operators that have an interconnection capability and those that are still oriented towards space and power. The cloud on-ramps, the interconnection is still in development, but it's definitely going to be strategic as the cloud footprints grow. I would just, I think in studying emerging markets around the world, we feel that the outsourcing adoption is still pretty nascent in this market at an earlier stage of development. It's not the adoption curve is still got quite a ways to go. So you should expect, I think, a lot of to see a lot of enterprises in the Jakarta market operating on premise, having the potential to move to shut down data centers, to optimize, to use cloud services or use co-location. Wanted to make just a quick comment. I think a lot of talk about this market I observed in the last, say, 3 to 4 years was around the new data, I guess the data sovereignty law, and that, which I think has been in development and not complete or official just yet. It's taken some time. But I think that, data location obviously is going to matter. Data sovereignty is going to matter. But I still think that, that has not, I think you can see, that has not really hindered the market's development. And that's because, performance has just become so much more critical as people use, and run so much, especially in a pandemic environment, run so much of their lives and their businesses online. And so, bringing infrastructure in country, regardless of the strictness or not of the data location, the fact of the matter is you've got to get closer to end users, and that's why infrastructure is coming. Why cloud infrastructure is coming in country. So those two things, performance and data location and sovereignty, kind of work hand in hand. And so, we should definitely expect that pattern won't change. I think Jakarta is a very interesting, I think a lot of these large metropolises around the world, especially in a market like Jakarta, where there's so many mobile users. It's definitely not just a hyperscale cloud market, but also has very interesting potential edge use cases. And I think that's something we'll see in the next few years. It's not necessarily something that's in this full report, but I thought I'd definitely make a note of that. And so, it's, in general, we feel that there's a lot of upside potential. I think a lot of the underlying fundamentals everyone sees and can agree that they have a lot of upside. The strategic location of Indonesia at the center of Southeast Asia, with subsea cable links down south and east towards Australia, New Zealand, of course, to neighboring Singapore, Malaysia. So all of these, I think, if you put everything together, make for a very compelling potential marketplace. The flip side, of course, is Jakarta has faced challenges over the infrastructure to support all this is still developing, but it's made incredible progress over the last few years in terms of the quality of the power that's available. The transportation in particular is a big issue, and of course the underlying fiber and mobile networks. But at the end of the day, and I think you're going to see an opportunity there with significant upside. And I want to end with that, is just to talk a bit more about why we think there's so much potential beyond the fact that there's so many people and so many consumers of content and users of mobile applications. So one of the points I think is interesting is that in developing markets, in mature markets, I should say, you kind of see a two-stage or a two-step move to the cloud. Obviously, the born on the cloud stuff is happening every day, and that part of the market continues to grow. But it's particularly in the enterprise market, you'll see on-premise, move to let's call it a traditional infrastructure environment. Might be a colocation facility, might be a private cloud environment, managed bare metal, and then some of that, not all of it, perhaps will move to the public cloud platform. Some of it will stay, in the middle and cross connect, and some of it will eventually move there. In emerging markets, we've seen. Because the adoption of outsourced infrastructure is a little less mature, a little less prevalent, and obviously the use of internet based technology is still emerging. We found that almost a skipping stage effect. So kind of moving from on-premise traditional, straight to public cloud, and of course, again, the born on the cloud stuff moving there. So I think what this creates is a certain kind of momentum and fills up the demand pipeline for public cloud in a way that you may not see in other markets around the world. Again, a market that is driven by hyperscale. I think the challenge of serving the hyperscale in such a competitive market is the fact that there's not a lot of hyperscale clouds out there, right? And often in markets they pick dance partners pretty quickly, and so there's it creates a very competitive market where getting in there, getting into the market is very strategic, and the timing is crucial. I think in certain markets around the world and in Asia, you're seeing the geopolitical impact affect which clouds eventually arrive, and so I think in markets around Southeast Asia, the Chinese clouds have less. I think less just in general, just less of a geopolitical challenge or hurdle. I think you'll find that the number of clouds that will potentially land Indonesia over time could well go down to, we have it at 9. So 5 US based and 4 China based. So 9 platforms. And I think you could eventually see pretty much all of them land and operate in-country infrastructure in Indonesia, obviously starting in Jakarta, and I think that's unique. You don't necessarily see that there. For example, in Australia, you may not see. That's a market where you may not see as many of the Chinese clouds go, but in Southeast Asia, I think you should expect them to land there, and so that creates a certain kind of longer tail effect. And I think the important part of that is, and many of you who subscribe to our research have seen this chart. You see that those the clouds the hyperscale platforms coming from China tend to slant to leasing and quite heavily. So they have been known less outside of China to engage in a self-build strategy. Part of that is, there are various factors, but I think that this is the situation on the ground, I think, for the foreseeable future. And so I think this creates a longer, just a longer tail, a more fuller pipeline of opportunity. I'm struggling here for the adjectives, but and I think obviously the big clouds are coming, and so I think it's a very unique and interesting part of the overall opportunity in this market. So one more thought, I think, as we look to the future in this market, I think that speaking of patterns that we've seen in markets around the world, once these markets mature and hyperscale builds out and the interconnection uptake moves up alongside it, in some markets, you could argue that a certain portion. I would say in markets, what you're going to see in the next 5 years is that certain markets will see certain operators on the retail colocation side will start to slow even further as more kind of the world moves to the public cloud. But certain portions of the retail colocation market will, we argue, rebound because of the demand there will be for connections to the cloud. So while our 5-year trajectory is pretty clear, you could see something, once the market matures, you could see the interconnection oriented part of the retail market make a bit of a rebound or make a bit of a comeback, but driven obviously by demand for connections to the cloud. So before we move to some quick questions, I just wanted to summarize some of the strategic activity, and this is meant to be not perfectly in chronological order and dates back to the early parts of the early years in the sector. But I'm not going to just read off all these developments, but in general, we've seen patterns that we've seen in other markets around the world with telcos being strategic buyers of early and mature independent data center operations. And then I think you saw the shift in the market after Telkom Indonesia, and then NTT acquired assets, and then the market started to change with internet growth, and then hyperscale. You start to see the hyperscale clouds land in markets that mature like that. Then you start to see players from established players in nearby markets start to enter. Some of the telco that operate these data centers, start to look at spinouts, which we've seen in other parts of the world, and Indonesia has seen that as well, with Princeton Digital Group successfully carved out data center portfolio from Axiata. And then in the last few years, we've seen more players come in pursuit of what I think I've tried to make clear is an emerging hyperscale opportunity, and we continue in our interactions with investors and operators in the space, see steady interest in this market. So it's been spent a lot of time on it lately, and continue to get a lot of questions about it. And so I think the next few years are going to be really interesting. So that concludes my presentation of the market. That's my email address. If you have questions about the report, please feel free to contact us. We have executive summaries available for anybody who wants to see it. I'm going to try my best here on my laptop to get to any comments. I see a question here around. Yes, the charts were megawatts, critical IT power. Thanks for the question, John. Let me just make sure the Q&A. Okay. Oh. No, Brian, I have not seen any activity from JD.com. Hi, Chris. So it's bigger hurdles or risks in this market. I think great question. So what do you see as the biggest hurdles or risks in the market? I mean, like with many markets, there's definitely a number of them. I think one of the challenges is going to be timing, especially if you're going after the hyperscale opportunity. I think that when these clouds land and they pick their dance partners and they're somewhat confined to certain or focus, I should say, on certain clusters or regions of a market, I think that will, that'll be a challenge, because if you're on the operating side and competing for these large opportunities, I think that would be a certain risk. You obviously want to be on the right side of it. It's just a whole bunch of questions just popped up. Yeah, and I would say another, just to provide some more feedback for you, Chris, I'd say another hurdle is dealing with and understanding and creating sales processes, being able evangelizing, being able to talk to the market about outsourced infrastructure. I think that's always been in markets that have a long history. There's always been that stage where you have to educate people on the benefits of outsourcing, or why do you want to use colocation environment? Why do you want to shut down or optimize? How do you take advantage of interconnection and the cloud? And in markets that have a shorter history with outsourcing, I think that's a definite challenge that operators need to think about. I'll move to another question here from Lionel. How are you? Indonesia has always been deemed as a difficult political space. So I'll summarize the question. Indonesia has been deemed as a somewhat difficult market to enter due to political stability and corruption. Any insights to why a lot of hyperscalers are going in on their own? I think I think the main answer to that question is that because the market is a little more nascent, because it's less mature, I think that they just don't have as many options. In some cases, there's just not. If you go to different markets around the world, there's a lot of options, or there are a lot of operators you can work with. There's a lot of inventory to choose from. It's almost like shopping. But I think in Indonesia it's much different, because it's been as you notice, there's only so many in our chart, there's only so many operators, established operators, quality operators, especially when you're talking about hyperscale. That field shortens quite quickly, and so there's I think maybe perhaps some of the hyperscalers are going on their own because they feel maybe they're not comfortable with an operator, or maybe they're not comfortable with their location, or the amount of inventory they're going to bring, how much they can scale. And so that's why I think that I made the argument that I think that they building their own is a way to ensure they can always come back and work with a colocation provider to ensure they have enough runway. So it's such a big challenge these days is to be able to kind of predict and have enough capacity to grow into, because once these guys land, what happens, they just continue to grow. But Brian, if you want to about pricing, maybe just ask offline. I'll move. Good question, Asmani. It's good to hear from you. Haven't seen you in a while. Hope you're well. What do you reckon will be the stabilized mix between hyperscale and retail? And when do you reckon we will reach the stabilization period? My earlier chart, we roughly have the market becoming 50-50 by 2025. And I think the split kind of starts to moderate at around that time frame, so 24, 25, probably into 26. We didn't project out it that far. But yeah, I think that you're going to see a build out wave. I think you'll see it stabilize around then a little bit. But these markets, I would not be surprised if then you see another wave of growth. And because this market we're projecting and expecting to be hyperscale heavy, you could see it move even further into the latter part of this decade. Maybe it becomes 70% hyperscale. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. Hey, John, another question from John. I did lead times for applications and zoning and permitting and bureaucracy. It's a good question. I don't the feedback. I rely on the feedback of some great operators in the market, and my understanding from the research and the time I've spent with great with knowledgeable people in the market is that it's a relatively okay process, if that's the right adjective. It's been described as anywhere from 4 to 6 months, and doesn't tend to pull too far longer than that. So yeah, that's some feedback I can give you, and that's definitely not because I did the application, but because operators whose feedback I trust has been is very reliable. So Robert, potential revenue size data. I would say, yeah, the full report has our projection of the market and all our projections of the market on a revenue basis. So if you'd like to see that, just let us know. This is an interesting question from Manjari. Thanks for the question. Are you able to track talent pool that supports the cloud gaming or related IT that is, are able to track the talent pool that supports cloud gaming or related IT that has correlation or relationship with data center? That's an interesting way. I mean, I make the comment in the report that that infrastructure, talent that's trained for cloud and data center, is a little rare in this marketplace. I haven't tracked it formally, but I've been told that talking to people I trust that there's definitely not an oversupply of qualified talent, but there's definitely emerging pockets around the country that operators can tap into. But in terms of operating, data center operating management teams local to the market, as you can see from some of the participation from providers outside Indonesia that have entered the market, experienced teams, given the market is younger, are not as prevalent. So that would be my kind of general feedback on the availability of human resources and talent. Sorry, here I'm just straining my eyes here to relatively small. Pierre, is there still demand for metropolitan retail data center? So I guess a retail data center in the city, creation of a telecom hub data center was already saturated by, or is it already saturated by cyber tower DCs? I would be optimistic. I think that Jakarta will see this, especially in the metro, in the middle, the center, I should say, of the city. I think you will see, as this market develops and matures, opportunities for interesting kind of, let's call them edge deployments rather than retail, but something like a 1, 2, 3, 4 megawatt for targeted things like gaming platforms, for high performance computing, for things like that. Anything where you really need to get closer to the end users and those massive clusters of people in the center of Jakarta. So yeah, and I think that there's always room in developing markets to build out connectivity ecosystems around, we want to call them a carrier hotel or a or a very network rich data center. I think that this market could accommodate that. Jacques, I think I'm sorry if I didn't get the pronunciation of the name right. The market seems to be dominated by major telco companies. Is it difficult for foreign firms to enter the market? I think that from what we've seen in terms of the activity in the last few years, I would say it's not overly difficult. I think obviously there are challenges, but a lot of companies have kicked around the idea of this market. A lot of people have evaluated, and as you've seen, a lot of companies from outside Indonesia have entered. So it seems to be a market I think that you will continue to see open up over time. Definitely the telecommunications market is a bit more closed off, I guess. That would be fair to say that, but it's definitely I think moving towards being more opened up over time. Another question from Pierre. The retail market was more tier 2 oriented. Sorry, price was there a trend of quality increase that we see in the market? So are we seeing more quality increase of kind of bread and butter core retail colocation, price sensitive colocation. I don't know if I've seen, I would say probably not. I would say that most of that part of the market has stayed relatively the same, and there's just been a huge gap and a jump to the hyperscale level colocation environment. There was one other question here that I wanted to get to, but okay, there's some questions I won't be able to get to. There are a few that I'm not comfortable answering for disclosure reasons. So apologies in it for not taking those on, but I want to be sensitive to disclosure. Yeah, thank you for the Happy New Year wishes. If any of these questions I didn't get to that you want to follow up with me, my email's there. Happy to try and answer them, and of course happy to share an executive summary of the report. So thanks for joining. Thanks for all the questions. Really appreciate the interest. I think that speaks a lot to the to what's going on in this market, and I hope to speak with you this year, and perhaps even towards the end of the year, see you in person. One of the first places I will be is when things open up would be Jakarta. So hope to talk to you soon, and have a good evening and stay safe. Bye now.